But that can change over time.
Sure, and so every time you do one of those studies and you have your consultant do that, that is what they're looking at. One thought that I have is to, just look at the information on the 30-foot slip on the marinas that we've selected and look at the amenities that they have to figure out what where we should fall based on amenities and market rates on those 30-foot slips, and then have a sliding scale going down and going up from that point. Because
So
there are
use it to
some
get our
neighbors-
midpoint of a rate, and then, so that's
Exactly.
kind of a single
Right.
rate that we either add 35 or 40 cents or 25 cents between the tiers, so we have a,
I would do it on a percentage, and,
Okay.
and so I figured out the percentage, the difference on the 2016 rates between the 20-foot and the 30-foot is a 5% increase between those two rates, and then it's 6% between the 30 and 40, and then 4% between the 40 and 50, and 5% between the 50 and 60. If we made it, 5% between each of them, you set that mid-rate, and it could just be the 30-foot, maybe it's the 40-foot rate, but.
You just find a
just-
benchmark baseline
Right,
and then
you
adjust
find
from
one-
there.
Right, and then, because that will set your sliding scale on that, and you have a percentage
Yep.
between. That would be, to me, the easy way to do that.
and that way if you have in the marinas, those that have the flat rate, it doesn't,
It doesn't skew the numbers.
Yeah.
correct,
Right.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
And we looked at the struggle with regional versus comparable. And we decided to look at regional, knowing that there are these differences of marinas, but it's also our location that's a factor. When you look at comparable, it becomes much harder because then the location makes a difference as well, and it's very hard for people to agree on what's comparable. So that's why we had moved to a regional versus say, select comparable marina.
But you can still do those regionals that we have noted here and say, this amenity has a laundry room and 3 restaurants within 3 walking blocks, that type of thing, or taxi service. So we
Doesn't have
look
a
at-
log yard to the west, loads
Correct,
dirt.
right, so that we look at all those amenities and the deficits too, and we figure, well, we're like 75% of what the amenities that are offered for the other marinas, and we set that as our benchmark. And then
How
do the
much does
sliding
that,
scale.
in that calculations, how off is the rates, proposed rates versus, what you
I
calculated?
didn't look at the proposed rates, I looked at where we are on
How,
the
how
current
much,
rates.
how much difference
It's
did it make it?
5%, 6%, I didn't figure out what the numbers would be, I was
No,
just
but for
looking at
each
the difference in-
individual one, how much did it change actually?
By pennies?
Yeah, by pennies, so 2016 is $5.91 for a 30-foot, what,
And then for a 60-foot, $6.84.
so this plus 26, 36, 26, is that how much it would increase to make it?
That's the difference now,
The current difference.
that's the current difference.
So we would have to increase it 20 cents to make it that
No,
percent, or
no,
decrease
no,
it?
that's the difference now, that's the difference now, and that's the percentage differences now.
So you basically just found the percentage based on
Right,
what those
right,
separations
right.
were?
And
just,
she's saying,
okay, I
let's
see what you're
make
saying.
it more consistent across our charges, from 20 to 60, now we're talking 80.
And we'd either pick a 30-foot slip or a 40-foot slip, and then focus really on that rate for
And
the
you-
6
and use percentages.
or 8 regional marinas,
Yes.
and try to say what we think that rate should
Yes.
be, and that becomes the starting point.
I like that idea. What do you think of that, Jerry? Using that as a, whatever you want, commissioners.
Okay.
There's always a subjectivity to even coming up with that starting point.
You still have the issue
Sure.
with the 30-foot apples and apples and oranges
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
well,
But you,
you're,
The difficult thing is using the cost approach. I'm looking at some of the budget numbers here, or the numbers that are presented. I don't see, for instance, in Boathaven, I don't see the debt service for the renovation. Wasn't there about a $6 million?
That's in the mortgage rates.
Pardon me?
Well, that's,
That was incorporated into mortgage rate.
well,
What I'm
we
saying
have
is I don't see that here in-
depreciation in lieu of actual debt service payments.
Okay, so you're saying the depreciation?
Yeah, the depreciation addresses that, or we could say we need to, set aside reserves for likely future replacement.
Sinking
That
fund or
of
something.
course
Right.
would be more, but that would be the private practice methodology that is normally applied. But if you get a loan and you have a commercial asset, you're required to have reserves for all these different things.
Do we know what the actual debt service is on that improvement over at?
One of the reasons why we don't use debt service is, sometimes the port is able to, use, depending on what the market situation of interest rates are, we may use more cash and less debt, and other times we may choose to use more debt and less cash, depending on the market and financial. So when we look at, what capital project happened to come that year, we don't feel that one line of business versus another should be
Okay.
impacted by our financing decision. So if we use depreciation, that evens it off.
What's the depreciation scale that you used on this?
Each asset has a different useful life, so if the float would be
It's
one thing
blended.
versus other. Mhm.
Okay.
And we'll go over that shortly, right, Jerry? We're gonna go over that
For the
amount
cost.
for the cost approach?
If you would like to. This slide here is trying to get some direction of, because now we're kind of back to 8 regional marinas, yes?
Well, what I
Is that
like
a word?
about what Commissioner Beauvais brought up is my fear of departing too far from what has been already approved and kind of used is we're not giving anything enough time to see how well it works. If we're gonna change it every year, we're never giving any one methodology enough a fair shake at how this, and Connie, or Commissioner Beauvais is more of just a little bit of a tweak, but it's still using the regional approach with cost CPI as the ceiling, and I like that because we're not just, I fear going, one direction and then all the way the other direction, and then we go back and it's like, none of these are gonna work if we only give them 1 year. And so we need to stick with something for a while to see how it works.
Well, and predictability for the tenants is important.
Yeah,
That they can.
and this gives predictability more than probably cost approach does.
Well, I think it's important though that we evaluate that.
Yeah,
Yes. What,
we don't wanna do it
Where
in
are
a
we?
bubble, we don't wanna do it in a bubble, I
Okay.
agree.
yeah, okay.
Okay. Not quite sure which direction to go for here. Most of the remaining slides either bring out more detail on the current methodology, which focuses on the 8 marinas, or there's some cost slides in there as well. So
And what-
this was kind of an important slide to see if we could get some direction on which one we want to go with.
And what you're saying is, based on our current methodology of regional and capping it at CPI +1, the proposed rates, most of them will stop at CPI +1.
Right, I don't wanna be too blunt, but we could do a lot of thrashing around and a lot of looking, but realpolitik, there's a certain range where we're gonna increase rates for 2017.
Yeah,
And it's probably CPI +1.
yeah.
Because we're gonna have another recession in 3-4 years, and we're gonna take a look at rates and say, and we
Yep.
have no rate increase. So if CPI +1 kind of falls in with what BST did, what the regional approach gives, what a cost approach might give with a reasonable subsidy, what focusing on a 30 and scaling it is. So I'm not telling you that's the answer, but if we don't, we just would like to pick what methodology we're gonna use in 2017 and focus on that. So.
What is the most common slip size that we have and that we see out in marinas? Is it a 30-foot?
I'd say a 40, but
40?
I defer to the experts.
I would say that in the past, 30 feet was more of normal, but definitely boats have been going to larger size, so it's probably a 40. And I agree with Jerry that from a standpoint of consistency and perception from the public and from the boat owners, going with that proposed, CPI +1 is gonna be the most palatable and easy to understand for everybody. If we make it too complex, people are gonna question it more, and it's gonna be more difficult to understand.
Well, we
Yeah.
haven't looked at our rates from a cost approach previously, and so I think that's important, what,
Yeah.
you know.
Internal, you
Yeah.
should do that anyway, but I mean,
Right.
from the standpoint of the community, they don't have access to the same amount of information and understanding.
They don't know how the cost got to the cost.
And some of those are subjective. I mean,
Yeah.
as far as, your administration and general costs, you can allocate those in a number of different ways, so.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's the downside to it.
Mhm.
But 40 feet is probably the
Okay.
common.
So using that as the standard and then every 10 feet minus and plus 5% would have more,